Hi, it's Calvin Niles, the Mindful Storyteller, and I am delighted to share with you stories of awakening. Each week, I'm going to be talking to people from around the world of various backgrounds and experiences. People I love, I know, and people I admire, but also those who are completely new to me. One thing all my guests will have in common is that they have been through a journey of awakening. By awakening, I mean a call to higher consciousness and deeper self-awareness beyond material reality. These stories will be real, challenging, funny, stimulating, and insightful. We're going to take our good time with these conversations. So listen from your comfy chair with your favorite drink, or on your weekend stroll, your morning routine, or whatever makes you happy. Stories of Awakening with me, Calvin Niles, and I look forward to you tuning in. Well, welcome Bill O'Brien Consciousness Coaching. Thank you so much for joining me on this conversation, Stories of Awakening. Bill is a man of incredible experience and doing amazing work. I'm just so delighted to have you to join on this show, Bill, for a conversation on your own story and what brought you to serve in the way you do, and anything else you want to share, basically. So welcome.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So where did it all start for you, Bill? And I think, did you say you're in Pennsylvania, USA?
Right now I'm in Bluebell, Pennsylvania. It's a suburb of Philadelphia. But I started out in Washington, D.C. That's where I was born and bred. And I had sort of a spiritual instinct from as long as I can remember. It's just sort of part of my identity. I've come to believe in reincarnation, so I figure it's built on something that came before. Anyway, so here I come into this kind of intensely Roman Catholic family. Good people, dutiful, not especially tuned into who I am. So that was sort of a thing I had to overcome as the years went by. They were married on the feast of St. Ignatius Loyola, July 31st, which matters because he was the founder of the Jesuit Order. By the time I was born, they were living in a Jesuit parish in Washington, D.C. The Jesuits, for our listeners, are an international order of Roman Catholic priests, formerly known as the Society of Jesus, founded in the 16th century, known for education. So, born on the feast of the Jesuit founder, living in a Jesuit parish. Then I went to a Jesuit high school and a Jesuit college. And then I joined the Maryland province of the Jesuits. And I was really passionate about the whole thing at the time, the whole Catholic thing, I mean. And so you do a 2-year stretch called the novitiate, meaning when you're a novice. And after about 1.5 years, I decided I wasn't quite ready to take vows, which is, they were coming up in the 6 months later. So I left, I went back, I finished up my college, graduated, and went back in because I still felt like that's where I belong. Now I felt, okay, now I'm ready. So here comes the good part. So it's October of 1968, and we're having an 8-day silent retreat. And it has been my experience my whole life that while I'm drawn to spiritual things, nothing much happens if I meditate or try to make something happen. It's like I'm met with silence. So it's the 5th day of this silent retreat. And I'm sitting there and I remembered something my first novice director had said. He said, if you're not getting something from God that seems perfectly legitimate to be asking for, you can pound on the pew and demand it, So, of course, it's not pound on the pew time. This is a silent retreat. I'm in my room. So I just got sort of irate with God. And this turned out to be the best thing I've ever done, because I told God, look, I don't just want to be one of those priests that kind of reads their theology notes. I want to be like this one and that one that I've met and really inspire me, like the novice director. And you can tell they're speaking from the heart. They're authentic. And I want to be that kind of priest. I don't see why I've been in and out and back in again, and you're still ignoring me. So still feeling bored, I picked up the scripture text that we were supposed to be praying with. And it was something I thought I knew what it meant. Turned out I didn't. It's the one where in the Christian Gospel of Luke, God is presented as the master, and we are the servant waiting for the master to return from a wedding feast. And it says, if he finds you waiting when he returns, even if it's a long time in the wee hours of the night, how happy will that servant be? The master will put on an apron and sit him down and wait on him. And that, it's been 45 years. And whenever, well, anyhow, that happened to me. And as is the case with these matters, as you know, Calvin, you can't put it into words, but I felt this presence at my feet. And I lost track of the fact that I was trying to make something out of my prayer. I was just totally drawn into this fascinating event. And I remembered, it popped into my head about Jesus washing the apostles' feet at the Last Supper. And Peter says, well, don't just wash my feet, wash my hands and my head as well. So I said something crazy like that. And the whole thing just kind of enveloped me. And I was gone. It went on. That was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I eventually returned to myself around midnight. I had missed dinner and didn't even know it.
Wow.
Yeah, so I went around to the chapel. The novitiate is a huge building shaped like an H. And at that time, there were not many people in it. It was after the vocations that started dropping off. So I'm walking through this big dark building down to the chapel, and I went in and I just sat there for about an hour. And there's Catholics have this candle next to the tabernacle to sort of remind everybody that what Catholics call the real presence in the Eucharist is there. So I just sat there in the glow of that white light, and I just felt so peaceful. So I went back to my room in the wee hours, and I couldn't sleep, but I tried to. So the next morning, we had our 9:30 conference with the novice director. So there were about 20 of us that year, and we gathered in the conference room, and I was still kind of floating. And when he started talking, I found I could complete his sentences. And I felt like I was there inside what he was saying. And then I realized my prayer had been answered, that I want to be like him. Uh-huh. And so then I got sort of teary-eyed right there in the conference room. It was kind of embarrassing, but everybody understood by this time what sort of things went on.
Yeah.
So that night, I had my own personal conference with him, and I was telling him about that. And he was just smiling and letting me talk. And he said, well, God answered your prayer, Bill. So we proceeded. So I went on through the rest of the Jesuit course, which is quite lengthy. Even after college, it was 9 years for me.
Wow.
So I went out to St. Louis to study philosophy, which bored me silly.
And were you in what sort of age were you at this time? Were you like a young 20s or when this all started?
I was 23 when I had that experience.
Wow.
Yeah.
And was that and were you already doing sorry to cut you there, Bill. Were you already doing silent retreats as part of your Jesuit upbringing anyway, as a routine? So you were already sort of familiar with that kind of environment, were you?
From my first time in, I was. We had an 8-day retreat and a 30-day retreat. So yes. And from being in Jesuit schools, you're trotted off to make weekend retreats. Of course, they weren't quite as intense, but they were silent as teenagers get, but they were supposed to be silent.
Yeah, teenage silence.
Yeah, teenager silence.
Oh, wow. Hi. If you're enjoying this conversation, you might like SOAR Book Club. Many similar conversations are happening in SOAR Book Club, a book club for the spiritually curious. If you like spiritual books and community, then why not join SOAR, where we can grow together, learn together in a fun and nurturing environment. Click the link below in the description to find out more about SOAR Book Club or to find out how you can join. It'd be nice to see you there. When you say that you missed dinner, that day, 6 o'clock had gone, you'd realized you'd missed dinner. Were you in this kind of, could you describe that moment? You know, it sounded like you went somewhere or your consciousness seemed to have been elsewhere maybe, or what was that experience like?
I was definitely elsewhere. I didn't, as I recall, I wasn't aware of missing dinner at dinner time. It was afterwards when I kind of came to and it was dark out. And I looked at my clock and I said, oh, missed dinner. It was, well, not real consequential. I mean, I could say it validated my experience, but I didn't feel like it needed validating.
Yeah.
I was just, okay, I missed dinner. I wasn't hungry or anything.
Yeah.
I don't think I got hungry till sometime the next day.
Wow. Yeah. And were you sitting or were you lying down or?
I was sitting at my desk like I am right now.
Yeah.
And there was a lamp here and I could look out my window. I was on the eastern side of the house. This was in Warnersville, Pennsylvania. So I'm looking out the window at the hills of Pennsylvania, and I can see the lights of Reading coming on as dusk settles. And of course, the sun was setting in the west, but you could see its rays kind of glowing in the valley. It was a good setting. Wow. I noticed spiritual things seem to cooperate better in the evening hours with me. I believe the veil is thinner at night, and also I find prayer is more satisfying, let's say, if I've kind of done the main stuff that I'm going to do for today, rather than in the morning when I'm thinking about getting to it. So that's what I have to say about that.
Interesting. And when you say that the veil is thinner, do you mean the sort of veil between material reality and sort of etheric or spiritual reality? Or what do you mean when you say the veil is thinner?
Well, I think when we die, we kind of pass through another dimension into wherever this place of happiness is. And that veil is more easily penetrated when we pray, so, or at least when I pray at night. And so spiritual entities seem to communicate with me better, or my soul responds better. It's kind of hard to put into words.
Yeah.
You know, the resurrection of Christ, I'll get off head stuff in a second. I had a debate with a friend of mine it's kind of trendy in theology that the resurrection didn't actually happen. So I was reading, it was sort of metaphorical, but I believe it did. And anyway, I was reading the autobiography of a yogi by Sachidananda Yogananda.
Yeah.
And on, I think it's page 152, it's carved in my psyche. There's a footnote in which he describes how the yogis of India routinely pass through the veil back and forth whenever they want to. So I thought, even though it seems like a big deal to us, the resurrection was no big deal to Jesus. So I believe in all that stuff. So I don't know, have I answered your question?
Yeah. It was really just a really powerful image, and I was trying to imagine, you know, what
The
what
veil.
that was. Yeah, imagine what that was like for you, and how that sort of experience of piercing the veil in the evening. Okay, so yeah, wow, this is. I knew this conversation was gonna be a good one, and we're only a few minutes in.
yeah, we're just getting started.
So yes, obviously that took you further along.
Yes. So then I went out to St. Louis for philosophy, which bored me silly. I also got a master's degree in urban affairs out there because around that time the Jesuits had an official conference and decided to shift their focus to social justice, a faith that does justice. So I was all in. So we had a place in the inner city of St. Louis. So I moved down there. So of the 3 years I was in St. Louis, I spent 2.5 down there among the poor. And it was a trying experience because you're doing without a lot of convenience. Plus you still got your studies, and and you have to go to class and everything. But it kind of gave me a more of a felt sense rather than a belief of how the world looks to the poor and how they experience it, because this was a poor neighborhood, and the international headquarters of Ralston Purina, which are shaped like a tall silo, were right there down the street, and they kept the bank of the building facing us was all glass, and they kept the lights on all night. So just that one irritant, that the light from this building is coming into your bedroom all night, you got a sense of all the things that poor people experience. I also learned to be thorough that you can't romanticize the poor. There's good people and nasty people, and people who would willingly get out of that, and people who just kind of settle in and throw in the towel. But I do think society needs to be organized better, so we're all on more of an even keel.
Yeah, well, I find that really fascinating, this experience, in terms of, you know, you've gone through this educational journey, and then some of it was really boring, some of it wasn't. What switched on the light then for you later? Because would you say you had already settled into your purpose then by this time? After you had this kind of awakening experience, and you went and you know, how did that start to show up in the work that you did, or the conversations that you had, or maybe you had another version of a similar experience that happened after that? How did that kind of start to unfold with you?
That's a good question. Well, I would say that experience when I was 23 set the course of the whole rest of my life. And the living among the poor was both an extension of that, as an expression of it, you know.
Yeah.
Because you know, it makes you more inclusive and more zealous, more caring and empathetic. So I did that partly because the order was going that way, and that's why I was getting my master's. But it was always back there, and I wanted to do specifically spiritual work. But I also had this thought that I didn't want to be in a sort of an ivory tower. You know, I wanted to be getting my hands dirty a little bit, so to speak.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but that experience did set the course of the whole rest of my life.
Wow. Wow.
So the next thing is you go and you teach. It's called Regency, which means it's a time when you rule. So I taught high school for 2 years in Baltimore, Loyola High School in Towson, outside Baltimore. And I taught junior and senior U.S. history. And that was a trip. I needed some love at the time, Calvin. My parents were not artistic in that area. They meant well. they didn't have the finesse.
Yeah.
So my students just loved me, and that was great. So of course I loved them in return. So we all had a big agape there. However, I was eager to move on and become a priest. But anyhow, that was a healing experience. Plus, I got to tell them about Vietnam, which seemed to be, they'd say things like, oh, we heard about you guys protesting. You know, it's like that was bad. The war was good because that's what the government was doing. So I had a chance to present the other point of view. One day in St. Louis, we decided we would block the main artery into the city. But somehow the police heard about it, so they got there ahead of us. So they were lining the curb, blocking our way into the street. So we ended up chickening out and not doing it. But I was right opposite a police officer, and I looked into his face, and he was the same age I was, and he looked scared. And I thought, okay, that's good information to see the other side. You know, it's not just a stereotype role. Okay, so I got to tell my students about that, and they were duly impressed. Well, some of them were.
Yeah, and this is you being able to bring a human element to this kind of insight. I mean, we're in an interesting time right now. Obviously, you know, you mentioned the Vietnam War, and you know, somebody of your experience and the times that you've obviously lived through in the work that you're doing, we're still seeing pretty much the same problems, aren't we, even right now? And the language that you use there, when you look that policeman in his eyes and you saw that he looked scared, you know, it's quite amazing that we sometimes forget the humanness in a lot of this, and that's coming through very clear in the way you taught, which I'm guessing is why the students loved you so much.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I still know a couple of them.
Oh, nice.
I thought of that watching the news of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and how the soldiers were told they were going to liberate Ukraine. And when they realized they had to shoot people, they say, well, they didn't tell us we had to kill people. So they began putting down the rifles, etc. So then it was on to theology, which is the last leg of preparation before ordination. That's a 3-year stretch. So as a Jesuit, you're supposed to be indifferent, meaning detached from where you're assigned, so you're ready to go and sound the alarm wherever they want to send you. So I didn't feel detached. So instead of going to New England, where all my friends were going, I told my superiors I wanted to go out to Berkeley, California, where there was another theologate. So I did, but I kind of, I was miserable when I got out there. I fell flat on my face. So this is a lesson in not running ahead of the spirit. You know, like I'm going to do this. I didn't feel invited to go out to California. It was like I'm going to be a hero and do this. So I got through my courses all right, but I requested a transfer back to where all my friends were, which was in Cambridge, Massachusetts, at what was then Western Jesuit School of Theology. So theology was more interesting, but it was still a lot of books. And I've been blessed with good intelligence, but I've never been the academic type. I'm more a person-to-person type. So it was kind of a drag, and I'm going to class and kind of have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree and another friggin' master's degree.
Yeah.
So, but we did it. So the first time I preached, I was scared. So you're ordained a deacon in the fall of the year before you're ordained in June. So you go out and you preach in a neighboring church. And I remember telling my spiritual director, I'm scared to death to get up there and preach. And he said, well, you got a lot of good stuff to say. And remember, you have the protection of the pulpit. Nobody can answer back. So, at least not in the Catholic Church. So I thought, okay.
I give you a confidence boost.
Yes, I feel safe. Anyhow, not to blow my own horn, but it turned out I was a good preacher. So that gave me experience. And the next thing I started to dread was my first Mass, because my family would be gathered there, your crazy cousin and your daffy uncle and everybody, and as well as people that knew you when you were a child. So looking back, it was a matter of neuro-linguistic programming. I programmed my brain, not realizing it, by rehearsing myself doing well at my first Mass, especially preaching. You program your mind, and then when you get there, your mind kicks in, which it did. We were out in the playground there's a school next to the church playground, and we were lined up. And as soon as the organ music started, it was like I had taken an anesthetic or a Valium or something. I just relaxed. It was great. And I just, hey, I'm going to be cool with this. Wow. So we pulled that off. Okay. So after a year of serving in my own parish, which was in Holy Trinity in Georgetown, well, I might as well put this part in. It makes me human. I was, I clashed with with the pastor of the parish. This is my first assignment, and I'm a rookie, right? He had a problem, which I won't mention, but I was audacious enough to point it out to him. So my days there were numbered. But looking back, I was still fighting my father. That's what I was doing. And this poor guy, I mean, what I told him was true, but I guess life is a learning experience. So that's one reason I'm glad we have reincarnation. You can say, okay, I won't do that again. So anyhow, I was sent to a retreat house. Of course, I was happy about that. And as far as the work went, so that was like heaven. I was doing exactly what I wanted to do all day long. And after about 4 years, I got bored doing that. Well, I wanted to be, I wasn't bored exactly, but I wanted to be more out in what you might call the real world. Once again, I was clashing with my superior, but he didn't ask me to leave. I decided it would be a good idea. So I asked for a transfer. So I was made the director of campus ministry at what was then Wheeling College in West Virginia. And that was a really challenging experience because you don't have any real leverage over the kids unless you go in the classroom and teach. Then you have a grade book, you know. But if you're just counting on their enthusiasm for the religious quest, it's a little difficult to get traction. So after 2 years, I said, I'd like to do parish work. So off I went to, this time I did not clash with my superior, by the way. So, and the provincial pointed that out to me. He said, I'd like you to notice that you haven't taken on the president of this institution. I said, thank you.
So you always had this you had a rebellious spirit then for a while.
Yeah.
You kind of sort of knew what you wanted, and you made that known pretty much. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question about,
sure.
A little while ago, you mentioned that when you wanted to go to Berkeley, and you said what you made a comment about not rushing the spirit or going in advance of the spirit or something to that effect.
Mm-hmm.
Did you mean that your personal will, you used your personal will to override kind of like a divine will, or is that what you felt after arriving at Berkeley? And what did you mean by that? Am I describing it in a reasonable way? And how did you realize that you were rushing the spirit at that time in the end?
Right. Good question. I didn't feel like I was overriding the divine will. I was choosing the harder thing, which if you spiral down to the root of that, I was trying to be a hero when I wasn't being called upon to be a hero. But there was a certain amount of virtue in wanting to exercise this thing about being ready to go where you don't necessarily want to go. So anyway, I was just so unhappy out there. I don't know why, but well, it was right after teaching all these students and all this love flipping around, and now you're back out there with 3 more years of books looking at you, and all your friends are in New England. Most of them. I did know some people there. Yeah. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So it was more of a case of you coming to the realization. I guess you missed your friends, your friendship group and everything, but then that gave you space maybe to reflect, and then you reflected and, you had a realization of, wanting to be a hero when you didn't really need to be. And did it happen at that moment, or did you reflect later on, like years down the line, and went, now I look back at that Berkeley adventure. 10 years later, you're like, I was trying to be a hero there.
Yeah. There's a lot of looking back. I don't know. I don't think I would have put it in the same terms I did today back then. I would have thought, okay, Bill, you bit off more than you can chew. So let's go crawling back to Cambridge and face it. So
yeah, that makes sense.
But then, and this is kind of significant, I wasn't happy in Cambridge either, even though we lived in residential houses around Harvard, and I was with some of my closest friends, but I was still kind of empty inside. I think I was missing that teaching experience in my students, and you go from all these people loving you to books and 3 years of it, and it was just kind of depressing. And maybe I was depressed, I don't know, looking back. But it's in more recent years that I would have described it as the hero thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, thank you for that. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. So moving back to, sorry, I know I jumped back in time a little bit there, but moving back to where you were, and you're now sort of, so you had the audacity to to make your feelings known, and that kind of you had this one moment where you were sort of, was it your spiritual director who said, you know, I hope you notice that this has now happened without your pushing back, or without your sort of normal rebelliousness surfacing?
You mean when he said you haven't taken on the president?
Yeah.
He didn't have to say that. I got the message.
Yeah.
For a long time, I was wondering why they were complaining about what I was rebelling about, because it was true. I was telling them the truth. And at one point they said, you know, no one's saying you're not right. It's just that you, and this is a good, one of them said, human nature can only absorb so much truth. So you have to be a little less direct, and they didn't want to say it, but be reminded of my place in the situation.
That's a big insight right there, actually, Bill.
Yeah.
You know, this kind of knowing when is a good time to push and when's, you know, because that's always a challenge, isn't it? Sometimes we in our lives, as human beings, and I could certainly tell you in my own life of times where I'm just like, right, I need to push this and make this happen because it's right. It's absolutely right.
Yeah.
But there comes, and that's another thing, actually, the wisdom seems to only arise afterwards. It's like no one can ever really teach you that.
The experience is the best teacher, as they say.
Yeah.
I think that's true. So I keep that in mind. If somebody gets in my face, I say, okay, this is a little karma here. So so I'm in Philadelphia. My last assignment as a Jesuit, and the provincial said he was sending me there because there's a parish in Old City, Philadelphia, near Independence Hall. It's called Old St. Joe's, old because it was the first Catholic place there. And he said, we've been trying to turn this place into a spiritual center for years, but we just haven't been able to do it. So go do your thing, and we're pretty sure you'll like this. So I did. But after about 3 years there, I sensed this shift inside me. And I told my superior, who was the pastor, I said, I'd like to go into Jungian analysis, because Jung appealed to me more, because you're dealing with dreams and the unconscious. I don't know. Freud was too negative. So we did. So my dreams, that's what you do in Jungian analysis. You talk about your dreams, which I never got my dreams much, but once you commit, you start having dreams. So I had dreams to kind of summarize. I'm watching the clock here on my computer to kind of summarize. I had rebirth dreams, and one day on my way over to the analyst, I was standing on the corner. He was a few blocks away, so I walked. I was standing on the corner, waiting for a red light to change, and I'm trying to balance things out here. Like, I'd wanted to be a Jesuit all my life, thought I was happy, and somehow I got the message, just leave. And and that seemed to shift all the pieces of the kaleidoscope around into a beautiful mosaic instead of a jumble of chaotic pieces. So I said, So I ran that past my analysts. Of course, they don't tell you much. They just kind of nod. Anyhow, I left the Jesuits in June of 1988. And as I'm going out the door, I said to my soul, because I didn't have a plan, I said, okay, now what? And what came back was shaman. And I thought that was cool, because I read Black Elk Speaks and Lame Deer Secret Visions, and I kind of had a feel for Native Americans, but I didn't know how to connect with all that. So I did a lot of interim weird things, like selling cable television door to door, and I was a real loser at that. And I don't know what else I did. Oh, then I started a spiritual center. That's what I did. I started a non-denominational spiritual center called the Nathaniel Center for Spiritual Growth. And so I had broadened my paradigm out from both Catholicism and Christianity. That was something I discovered. I wasn't a Catholic anymore. I wasn't just not a Jesuit. Later in shamanism, I learned that it's a passage on the medicine wheel, which is the patron of this section of the medicine wheel is the serpent, and you shed your past the way the serpent sheds its skin. And so that's when I understood why I had left. I had outgrown the Jesuit order. I actually left on intuition. I couldn't really explain it to anybody. So the Nathaniel Center, and that was good. I got to say things you can't say as a Jesuit, about Buddhism and etc.
Yeah.
So life moved us on. I ran afoul of the auxiliary bishop, the Catholic Bishop of Washington, and he sent a letter out to all the pastors in Washington. We think it best that Mr. O'Brien not be advertised in your parish bulletins. So he was a real right-wing guy. So one of my pastor patrons said, you can take him on if you want to, Bill, but I wouldn't recommend it. So we left Washington, went to Rockville. We were there 3 years. I continued to have people coming from Washington, continued doing seminars. Like I created an 8-week seminar it's my foundation course. It's called the Nathaniel Program, 8 weeks of meditation and spiritual awareness training. And then our friends moved to Shepherdstown, West Virginia. And I said, we went to visit them, and the energy, I said, we gotta live in Chip. By this time I'm married. I married to Linda in 1997. And she was of similar mind to myself. So we lived there for 16 years. But it was really hard to make a living there doing what I do, because I hope none of them are going to listen to this. They're great people, but they don't want to part with their money. So as long as it was free, you had a big crowd. So anyhow, I had to do something to earn money. So for the next 7 years, I taught Latin in Loudoun County, Virginia, at Dominion High School. And that was fun. It reconnected all that loving experience. But it was a 3-hour round trip commute, and I had 5 preps. And I said, man. So around this time, Linda says, why don't we move closer to her family in Philadelphia? So we did. So that's how we got to be here in Bluebell. And I'm finding people much more receptive here. But yeah. I'm still becoming known. We've only been here since September.
Yeah.
But I send out this thing several times a week called Wisdom Keepers, which is a little slice of my view of where things are, which is, universal. And I get to point things out to people. It feels very good. You don't know what you're accomplishing, but it feels good to be able to express yourself out there. Maybe you feel that doing what you're doing. Yeah. And so I've been pointing up the plight of the Native Americans, and I weave it in with white domination of the African slaves and the natives. And I said, look at what we're doing. And I get to write things like, I write to the local newspaper because they have a right-wing columnist, and he doesn't get all this stuff. And so I wrote, and I said, what do you mean critical race theory? What's critical about it? There's no, or what's theoretical about it? There's no argument here. And here's the record. And some people don't call it white shaming when you talk about any of this or the natives. So I get to say white shame. Well, maybe it's Lent. How about maybe some shame would be good? I mean,
you've taken your rebellious streak and truth-speaking nature out of the Jesuits, and you brought it straight to the press.
Thank you. I like that.
You know what I was thinking actually. Thank you for sharing what a powerful journey, and I know it's always difficult to kind of squeeze and condense a whole life of amazing work into one single conversation, and maybe we can have another one too. But you started by saying that, this karmic propensity, brought you to your life into the parents that you had in this Jesuit order. Did you always know from your Jesuit upbringing? I mean, do Jesuits accept karma the way you talk about it now? Is this something that you came to realize later, or when did you start to use that kind of language in your sort of perspective on life?
Well, I'm not sure, but probably after I left the Jesuits. I don't remember any of them ever using that word. They're a cool bunch of people, but they were firmly in the frame of Christianity and Roman Catholicism. They were founded to defend the papacy. Anyway, probably after I left, let me quickly run through a few things that I did to sort of frame the karma thing. I began doing things I probably could not have gotten permission to do in the Jesuits. So I made a retreat with Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnam Buddhist, whom I consider a saint, in Key West, and that was cool. And I began doing Buddhist meditation, and I got the insight that Buddha tells you how to live the way Christ tells you to live, but doesn't tell you how. So that was cool. Then I went to Prague in 1992 to one of Stan Grof's holotropic breathwork conferences, and I had the experience. You go off into non-ordinary reality, and I had the experience of being in the presence of a Native American elder beating his drum, and he wanted me to dance, and I got up on my mat and danced, and there's 300 people. We're all on mats doing crazy things, and afterwards people said, "Wow, what was that dance?" And I said, "I don't know." "Well, can you do it again?" "No, I can't." "What's it called?" "I don't know." But anyhow, I got that experience again of non-ordinary reality, sort of induced by a breathing mechanism that he teaches. So then we came around to Alberto Vialdo, my wife and I. I was looking for a really professional shaman type, going back to be a shaman. So we went out there for 28 days to the Mojave Desert, the Joshua Tree Retreat and Conference Center, but you're actually in the desert. And for 28 days, we were immersed in shamanism. And that's probably where I realized the serpent shed his skin because he outgrew it and all that. And went back to my experience of leaving. And it's nice when you can discover that something you did intuitively, and which lots of people said, "Oh, you can't do that." Leaving the Jesuits turned out to be the right thing to do. And it gives you this great confidence that you can trust your heart.
Bill, is two things. I just had an insight. I just had an insight in this conversation, so I'm going to share that. I'm going to share that insight, and also, you've also just kind of reminded me about, you said in 1988 you just had this voice which just said it's time to leave the Jesuit order, but then it became clear in the conversation you didn't know what you're going to do next, and that was incredibly courageous. But I guess it was so clear to you that this move or step had to be taken, that I guess was courage even a question, maybe? But I think it's just such a great example of following that intuition, that God voice inside, maybe. But the insight that I think I've just had, there is a story. One of the oldest stories is considered the oldest written story, the Epic of Gilgamesh, the tablets. And in that story, I mean, I talk about this story all the time, but I just had an insight listening to you. This story is referred to as the oldest story, and because I work a lot with stories and what I do, I refer to this a lot. But there's a part, because he was meant to be Gilgamesh. I don't know if you know the tale, but in summary, he was meant to be this really malevolent part man, part god ruler of Uruk, this kingdom. And he basically goes on this long journey after befriending somebody who was basically sent to challenge his power, but he won. They became like brothers. And then this guy died after a really amazing story. But there's a part that happens at the end, because after his friend dies, or who he perceived to be like a brother, he grieved so badly, he didn't want to experience death. And so he sought immortality. So when he sought immortality, he went to Ursanabi, the boatman, and then he eventually saw Utnapishtim, who told him the secret to immortality eventually, which was to get this plant from the bottom of this body of water. He went, got the plant, swam back across the body of water, and right coming up to the end of the story, as he was getting out of the water, he comes out, and the plant is down on the ground next to him, and a snake comes and eats the plant, and then the snake sheds its skin and becomes youthful. And he realizes that the snake obviously is consumed this plant of immortality. But the insight I think I'm getting right now, listening to you about the snake and the serpent and the shedding of the skin, that was the metaphor for his transformation. That was his transformation right there. As you talk about shedding the layers around the circle, and that serpent shedding its layer, to me, becomes very clear, because the way this story is used, it's not really very clear how Gilgamesh transforms. But I think the answer is in the snake. And that's thanks to you, Bill.
Well, I'm glad to go. I was thinking that all along. I just wanted to see if you could pick it up. No, I wasn't.
I got it.
All right.
Well, it's an absolute honor. Thank you so much for sharing a wonderful conversation with me. I'll put all of your connection details in the show notes and YouTube below in the description. And yeah, just delighted to have met you in this really organic way. This has happened now for a couple of times for a number of people. So yeah, just thank you so much, Bill.
You're welcome. My pleasure. I enjoyed it. And you're a delightful human being.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. What is most meaningful for you in 2022? Is it healing and forgiveness? Is it love and belonging? Or maybe it's the courage to be and to act. Soar Book Club has all of this for you. If you want to read more and need accountability to keep you moving forward in your already busy life, are you looking for inspiration to develop your spiritual awareness? Maybe you want to be part of a positive community during these uncertain times, or connect with like-minded people who love stories and books. Then join Soar Book Club. Hop on board. The train is about to leave the station, and I would love to have you on the journey with me. So click the link below to join. That's Soar Book Club with me, Calvin Niles. I hope to see you there.